Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm sorry that I don't really speak Spanish. I understand Spanish, but I speak Portuñol, so I think it's safer to give the lecture in English, okay? But if you don't understand something, just let me know. I have a PhD in forensic anthropology from the University of Coimbra in Portugal. I'm Portuguese. But since last year, I've been working in Simon Fraser University in Canada as a postdoc and a lecturer. And for those of you who don't know much about Canada and Portugal, these are two quite different countries. First of all, in terms of size, because Canada is more or less 10 times bigger than Portugal. And in terms of inhabitants, it has more or less 3 times more inhabitants than Portugal. So when we check the number of inhabitants per kilometer square, Portugal actually has way more than Canada. And this is one of the reasons why the funerary practices in both countries are so different. Because in Canada, once the dead are buried, they are not exhumed, ever, unless there is a judicial order because there is a suspect of crime, for example. But in Portugal, it is common practice to exhume the dead and reuse the burials. The dead used to be buried inside and around the walls of local churches. But in 1835, the first public cemeteries were established in the country, and from that moment on, it was completely forbidden to bury the dead inside or around the local churches. So this happened all around Europe in the 19th century because people started thinking that it was quite unsanitary to bury the dead inside the churches when people used to go to the Mass every single week, and also because Napoleon Bonaparte was making some changes in Europe. So over the years in Portugal, cemetery laws were created and amended, taking into consideration the needs of the population at that time. And the last law that was created in Portugal was in 1998, and that's still the law in force today in the country. And this law says that a dead individual can either be cremated or buried in a public cemetery. And what else does this law tell us? It tells us that a grave can either be temporary or perpetual. What does this mean? It means that a temporary grave is rented for a period of time, while a perpetual grave is bought, and then it usually passes from generation to generation. Burials, it can be vaults, soil graves, or aerobic consumption models, which I don't know if you have that in Chile or not, but we're going to talk about that later. Then this law also says that the coffins must be made of easily destroyable wood for soil graves and the aerobic consumption models, and made of zinc for vaults. And the inhumation period has to be of 3 years minimum. After those 3 years, the graves can be opened, and if the individual is not completely skeletonized, it still has some tissues, doesn't matter what kind of soft tissues. It can be skin, muscle, tendons. In that case, the grave has to be closed again, and the inhumation period has to continue for consecutive periods of 2 years until complete decomposition is achieved. If the individual is completely skeletonized, then the remains can either be cremated or relocated to an ossuary or family plot. That depends on the relatives' wishes. And this way we can reuse the graves. So, as I was saying, we have different types of vaults. We have the so-called chapel vaults that have the individuals can be buried underground or above ground. We have some kind of shelves where you can put the coffins. We also have completely underground vaults or above ground vaults that are individual. We have the common soil graves. And these are the aerobic consumption models. Here in the aerobic consumption models, there are also individual. There can be temporary or perpetual, just like all the other types of graves. But in the back of the wall, you have two holes. The lower hole is for the decomposition fluids to be released. And the upper hole is for the air to come into the aerobic consumption model to help decomposition. As I told you, this law is from 1998, it's kind of old already. But since the 2000s, we have been problems because according to this law, 3 years is more than enough for a body to decompose and we can reuse the graves. But the problem is that the bodies, most of the times, all around the country, are taking way longer than 3 years to completely decompose. And this is a problem both for the cemeteries and the city halls in charge of the cemeteries, because we have no burial space to bury the new dead. The existing cemeteries are either too small or not in enough quantity for the large populational number that we have within the limits of the cities. And of course, we also have no place for new constructions within the limits of the cities because it's quite a small country. So this is why for us, it's so important to exhume the dead as soon as possible and reuse the graves because of lack of burial space. And this is one of the reasons why in Canada, they don't exhume the dead because they don't have the need to exhume the dead because it's such a big country, right? Just like in the US. But this practice of reusing the burials is not new at all. And we have quite a lot of chapel of bones all around Portugal, but especially in the south, when before the 1835, because there was also no space to bury the dead inside or around the local churches, the remains would be exhumed and would be used to cover the walls of chapels. This is why we have so many documented osteological collections in Portugal. I don't know if you have ever read papers about it, but we have quite a lot, especially in Lisbon and in Coimbra. And as you can see here, this map with all the osteological collections in the world is not updated because this is a map from 2018, but you can see that this is common practice all around Europe. So we have quite a lot of osteological collections in Europe. But like I said in the beginning, Canada don't exhume the dead and they don't really have osteological collections. There is only one in Ontario that is still being used for research and teaching purposes. But all the other remains that have been used so far for teaching purposes in universities are mostly remains of the First Nations individuals from Indigenous. And now with repatriation, it's not allowed to study and use those remains anymore, and everything is being repatriated to the original communities. So Canada is facing also a huge problem because they don't have real bones for research and teaching purposes, anatomy purposes, and they have been using a lot of models. As you might be aware, as good as 3D printing is, it's not that accurate, right? It's not the same as holding a real bone and studying all the human variability that we can find in real individuals. So this is why an agreement was made between my university and the municipality of Lisbon in Portugal. So we could study some Portuguese remains in Canada. This agreement took quite a few years because there was a lot of controversy, as you can imagine, around this project. Because one of the main questions that especially the Portuguese community was asking is, if Canada don't want to exhume their dead and study their dead, why should we borrow our dead to them for them to study? In the end, a lot of ethical commissions and a legal institute in Portugal was involved, of course. Everything was approved. And then 60 individuals were shipped from Lisbon to Vancouver. As a loan, it will be just for 10 years, then all the remains will be returned to Portugal. But this is now the new collection that we have in Canada. So we have a total of 60 individuals, 21 females and 39 males. All of them died between 1928 and 1981. And we have individuals whose age at death ranged between 2 days and 86 years old. 3 of the individuals, we are not certain about their age at death. We are still trying to find the death certificates and the birth certificates to be sure. And the purpose of this is to use these remains for teaching, but also for research. They are still being curated by me. I'm with the help of some students. We have been cleaning the remains, doing the inventory, and then eventually we can start using them for teaching and research purposes. But as you can see, we have quite a lot of individuals that are sub-adults. And I think you might be aware that between all the osteological collections that exist in the world, most of the individuals are older individuals, right? Because it's quite difficult to have sub-adults. The bones are way more fragile, they will decompose way faster. And also because in this case of the osteological collections that come from cemeteries, they are remains that are considered abandoned by their families. And it's way not easier, that's not the best word, but usually older individuals will be abandoned first because their descendants might die, while the younger individuals, their parents and the relatives will be more careful in not abandoning the remains. So that's why it's also difficult to have sub-adults in collections. I guess you all know what biological profile estimation is, right? Biological profile comprises the estimation of ancestry, sex, age at death, and stature. There are a lot of methods, as you know, to estimate the biological profile in adults and also in sub-adults. From genetics to long bone lengths to regression formula. What are the main problems of all of the methods that exist? First of all, is that individuals worldwide grow at different rates, right? And also, we have to consider the secular changes that are influenced by the availability of nutrients, a better diet, a different climate, a different environment, the physiological stress that individuals suffer through time. And the existing methods are mostly population specific, which is also not very good because in countries that have no osteological collections, then the existing methods will not be able to be applied to those populations. And we don't want that. So that's why I've been here for the past 3 weeks, because my postdoc supervisor and we want to improve accuracy in estimation, especially age at death estimation from growing bones and teeth. And that's why we need a huge database, preferably with individuals from different collections all over the world. So I have here a question mark because I don't know how many individuals I'll be able to do until tomorrow. So far, I have 61, which is a good number. And I've been here for the past 3 weeks to measure some bones and check the maturation of those bones in individuals of 12 years of age or under. And I've also been checking their teeth and taking X-rays in all individuals of 22 years of age or under. So different bones have been measuring from femurs to pubis to scapula. I've been also checking the maturation levels if the epiphyses are completely fused, partially fused, or not fused at all. And I brought with me from Canada a portable dental X-ray machine. That's the one you see here. It's quite small. It fits on a suitcase. And what you have here, it's the remote that you click so the X-ray is taken. And you also have here a sensor. Here you can see a little bit better. So you have this gray part over here, which is the sensor. It's quite small. This is Play-Doh to support the sensor, so it's fixed on the table. And here, I don't know if you can see, but there's like this little gray thing, which is a 10 millimeters scale. And the exposure time of the X-rays is very, very fast. It's less than 1 second. And while I'm taking the X-rays, and if you ever use an X-ray machine, you have to be wearing a collar and an apron that is quite heavy because it has lead to protect you from the X-rays. And you also have to use a dosimeter to check this dosimeter in this case is it's on the Canadian national system, and they are constantly checking the level of radiation I've been submitted to. So if the radiation is too high, that will set an alarm, and they will call me checking what the hell is going on. So this is the final result of the X-rays. You can see here the 10 millimeter scale. Okay, in this case, this is an example of one of the individuals. You have the first, second, and third permanent molars. You can see that the roots are not completely formed. And here you have a first and second deciduous molars and the first and second permanent premolars, whose roots are also not completely formed. So once I go back to Canada, I'll use a software called ImageJ, so I can use this scale and measure the length of the teeth to check if there is any correlation between the length of the different teeth and the age at death of the individuals. Because as you might be aware, teeth are better indicators for age at death in sub-adults because they are not as influenced as bones from the environmental influences. Yeah, this is what I've been doing for the past 3 weeks. And thank you so much for listening to it.